Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're heading to a city of profound dualities, nestled right between the Jemez and Sangre de Cristo mountain ranges in New Mexico. We're talking about Española. Now, this isn't just a local story. It's really a reflection of the broader American experience. It's a place with an incredible 400-year history, deep cultural roots, and modern-day struggles that mirror some of the most complex socioeconomic challenges in America today. Honestly, if you want to understand the cycles of boom, bust, resilience, and identity in this country, you have to understand Española.
So, you might be wondering, how exactly did America's first capital become both a vibrant cultural mecca and the epicenter of a drug crisis? Okay, let's dive into this because the narrative whiplash of Española's story is absolutely fascinating. To truly get it, we have to look at how its profound, deeply rooted history collides head-on with its present reality.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll trace its origins as America's first capital, look at the boom and bust of the railroad era, explore its reign as the lowrider capital of the world, confront the valley's dark epidemic, and finally, look at resilience and hope.
Section 1. America's first capital, the deep roots of Nuevo Mexico.
To really understand Española, you have to realize that this isn't just some old town. It's the literal foundation of European settlement in what is now the United States. Decades before Jamestown or Plymouth Rock, we're talking 1598, Don Juan de Oñate brought an ambitious, sprawling expedition of Spanish settlers to the confluence of the Rio Grande and Rio Chama. They established a capital at San Gabriel, making this area the very first European capital in the U.S. By 1610, the capital moved over to Santa Fe, and the intense colonial tension culminated in the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, which was a massive, coordinated uprising by the indigenous population. This intense early history completely set the stage for 4 centuries of conflict, compromise, and eventual coexistence between Spanish settlers and native Pueblo populations.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that over centuries, these distinct groups didn't just live next to each other, their cultures actually merged through a process called syncretism. A perfect example of this is the nearby Santuario de Chimayo. Built in the early 1800s, it's known as the Lourdes of North America because of its healing dirt. It beautifully illustrates this blending, combining Spanish Catholicism, Mexican devotion, and Puebloan spirituality into a uniquely Nuevo Mexicano culture. This deep spiritual foundation is absolutely crucial to understanding the community's modern identity.
Section 2. The Railroad Era. Boom and bust on the Chile Line.
Fast forward to the late 19th century, and this quiet farming region experienced a massive industrial shift. In 1880, the narrow-gauge Denver and Rio Grande Railroad arrived. Popularly known as the Chile Line, this railway brought in businessmen and essentially transformed the hamlet into a booming commercial hub. The city officially incorporated in 1925, but, the boom didn't last. By 1941, due to unprofitability, the railroad was permanently abandoned. Just imagine the economic engine of your hometown being literally ripped out of the ground overnight. Tracks were dismantled, people lost their livelihoods instantly, and a lot of locals were forced into a desperate pivot, either returning to subsistence farming or finding really precarious work at the newly established Los Alamos National Laboratory nearby.
Section 3. Lowrider Capital of the World. Cruising with Pride. Out of those quiet post-railroad years, the 1980s saw Española proudly declare a brand new identity that made it globally famous: the lowrider capital of the world. With the railroad gone and economic opportunities shifting, automobiles became far more than just getting from point A to point B. They became a canvas for a community forging a new identity. The lowrider culture here is built on 4 distinct pillars: pride, faith, art, and tradition. This isn't just about cars with impressive hydraulics, right? People create intricate paintings of religious figures on hoods, hang rosaries on rearview mirrors. It's incredibly common to see these magnificent machines cruising low and slow for religious holidays like Good Friday or parked proudly at local weddings.
I love this quote from the New Mexico tourism records. "These cars are works of art, expressions of faith and culture, and cornerstones of families." It just perfectly humanizes the culture. A single car might represent tens of thousands of dollars of investment, passed down, meticulously customized, and worked on across generations. It's the ultimate symbol of community pride. Think about it for a second. What object in your life carries that kind of generational weight and creative expression?
Section 4. The Valley's Dark Epidemic, a Generation in Crisis.
But just as the city shines with cultural pride, it also grapples with a very dark reality. For decades, federal statistics have consistently ranked Española among the highest in the nation for drug overdoses. At its peak, The area saw 43 drug-related deaths per 100,000 people. Compare that to a national average of just 7.3. That staggering difference highlights how the valley became the epicenter for black tar and brown powder heroin in the latter part of the 20th century.
To understand why this epidemic took hold so fiercely, we have to look at the economic environment, and the sources highlight a profoundly ironic contrast. Española suffers from deep poverty, struggling schools, and a real lack of a strong tax base. Meanwhile, it shares a border with Los Alamos, a town boasting tremendous wealth and massive federal nuclear lab budgets. It is a stunning paradox to have one of the poorest cities in America sitting directly in the shadow of immense scientific wealth. Very few of those federal resources bleed over into Española, leaving the local police force chronically underfunded and the community starved of vital infrastructure.
The documentary sources provide a really clear scientific lens on what happens to the youth growing up in this environment, explaining something called addiction neural pathways. When kids here start experimenting with hard drugs as early as 15 years old, habitual use literally rewires their brain chemistry. It hijacks the prefrontal cortex, which is your decision-making center, and forces the brain to operate purely in the midbrain's fight-or-flight survival mode. When you understand this science, you realize that addiction ceases to be a choice. It becomes a chronic, neurological disease entirely distinct from a moral failing.
Compounding this medical crisis is a shift in the supply chain. Law enforcement in the area notes a grim reality. I fear the day that meth comes to Española. Now they've switched over to meth because of the price. This is easily becoming an epidemic for us as well. The crisis is rapidly evolving. Users are moving from heroin to cheaper, more available, and often much more volatile methamphetamine. This shift is driving up violent crime rates and further taxing an already stretched police force.
The collateral damage of this shift lands squarely on the shoulders of the next generation. A local teacher shared this raw, heartbreaking insight. About 60% of students are raised by grandparents due to recovery, incarceration, death, suicide. They're in a dis-ease. Teachers report kids coming to school needing shoes, needing winter jackets, or simply being too angry or hungry to learn because of the chaos in their homes. When over half a generation is carrying this level of trauma, it severely impacts the community's future workforce and threatens the very social fabric that holds the city together.
Section 5. Resilience and Hope, Healing the Crossfire.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because despite these staggering numbers, Española is absolutely not giving up. The executive director of a local recovery program is living proof of this fight. He states, "I was homeless for 6 years from 2006 to 2012. What I went through in the past makes me who I am today." This is a man who literally lived under a bridge in Española, entirely defeated his addiction, and is now dedicating his life to pulling others out of the exact same cycle. And he's part of a much wider grassroots effort fighting for the city's future. The Pathway Shelter is supporting the homeless population with fundamental needs. The Communities in Schools program is actively providing wraparound services, giving kids food, tutoring, and essential social-emotional support. And then you have local artists and leaders using art and dance to inspire youth, showing them a tangible world of potential and creativity outside the struggles of the valley.
But as local advocates stress, fixing the root causes of this trauma won't happen overnight. It requires sustained, serious work. It's going to take a decade or more of focused effort to support the family unit, provide social-emotional wellness, and build economic bases. This is really about restoring the community pride that this valley so rightfully deserves. When you look at the 400 years of history we've discussed, from colonial tension to the railroad boom and bust, you realize that healing a city with this much generational trauma is the ultimate test of its historic resilience.
Española has survived the harsh realities of the frontier way back in 1598, the total collapse of the railroad, and decades of economic shadow. It is a city defined by an unshakable will to survive. So how will this community, rich with history and fierce pride, write its next chapter of healing? It's a fascinating question, and definitely one worth watching closely. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity to learn even more about the incredible story of Española.